because I want you all to truly understand the caliber of the individual that we have joining us today. Usually, when we talk about transitioning, we talk about finding a seat at the table. Our guest today did not just find a seat at the table, he built the tables, folks. He is a masterclass when it comes down to the SBA and literally wrote the playbook on how veterans interact with the SBA. Scott is not just a scholar, but he's a practitioner of the highest order. As the executive director of the National Veteran Small Business Coalition, he is the primary architect in ensuring that veteran owned businesses aren't just participating at the federal level, they are dominating it. Whether he is an SBA administrator and needs advice on Veterans Affairs, when the SBA administration need advice, they call Scott. When Congress need to understand a policy affecting boots on the ground with the SBA, Scott is the one in the room. He is a federal appointee as an advisory committee member to the Veterans Business Affairs Committee, an interagency task force member of the Veterans Business Development Association as well. On top of that, he is the author of the Owner's Playbook, a masterclass in shifting from chaos and the daily grind to discipline, profitable execution. He has dedicated his post-service life to one thing, making sure that when you hang up the uniform, you are the greatest victor of them all. Scott is a masterclass, a world of knowledge, and it is a huge, huge honor and a privilege to have someone of this caliber here. Ladies and gentlemen, the man, the myth, and the veteran's greatest advocate legend, Mr. Scott Jensen. Good morning, Scott. How are you today, sir?
Holy cow. I think I probably just need to take a break now, and I'm good, Clay. How are you?
I'm
Wish my
doing
mom,
all right. It
if
was
I had,
when I saw that you were back on the schedule. Welcome back, by the way. I'm
thanks.
like, I need to sit there and have Scott. I want to be hosting Scott's session because you are truly a masterclass of what you do and everything that you do here today. So again, just huge honor and a huge privilege, and having you here first shot Monday morning really is exciting for me. So I like to kick things off. You have a fantastic resume, your history, Naval Academy, Naval Postgraduate School, United States Marine Corps. But I do like to sit there and start things out with the biggest question of them all. Let's just say that you are a Marvel superhero. What was the pathway for you joining the Marine Corps via the Academy? And, what was your origin story? What got you down that path?
Yeah, great question. I came from simple means. I grew up in the Rocky Mountains of Idaho, and my dad was a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. I had a lot of service in the background, and I wanted to, I just wanted to match that same level of service. Um, and so that's really what got me started. And then, as I started my military career and my education, it became obvious that to me that I wanted to continue to serve like everybody else on this call. And Clay, I was fortunate to get to spend 27 years doing that. I obviously didn't expect to necessarily just when I started that I would survive that long in the Marine Corps, uh, figuratively or literally in some cases. But it was a true pleasure to get to serve that long beside the men and women that wear our nation's cloth, and I was really excited to do that. And that excitement actually came with probably some detriment when it came time to then leave the Marine Corps and face transition, like so many of these folks on this call are doing. It was a joy of my life. It fit me like a glove, and I really never had to evaluate myself as to what made me tick, what was making me successful in the Marine Corps, and not really having a firm understanding of that led to some challenges as I got out. So we talk about successes, but I would say the biggest point of my transition were the failures that got me eventually to some successes. And I for a crowd like this that's in transition, I think it's more important that we all accept the fact that there's going to be some failures and some challenges in ways that we're not used to facing in our military careers. Maybe some, but it's a huge difference. between what we face in the military and how we transition, and then the civilian life afterwards.
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head. And there's obviously a lot of chaos that goes along with it. And in your book, you talk about moving away from firefighting to disciplined execution. Why is it that veterans who are trained in those high stress environments, from your perspective, often struggle with that chaos when they do hit the civilian market?
Well, it's new to them. We don't, whether you spend 4 years or 40 years, none of what we do in the military, on one hand, prepares us for kind of the business readiness of running your own company or being a business owner. Um, but we also come with a lot of characteristics that make us ideal in that environment. But it's a whole different environment uh, for us. And there's a couple of things that make us different that sometimes don't suit us well. One is the the understanding and importance of engaging with other people and engaging with people that aren't like us. As networking, whatever you want to call it, but acknowledging that there's no rank structure in the civilian world, and there's certainly no rank structure in the business world. We tend to hesitate to reach out or engage with people who we perceive as perhaps quote unquote senior to us. Oh, I can't talk to a CEO. I can't talk to a retired admiral or a general because they're senior to me. Well, seniority goes out the window when we become Scott and Clay and everybody else in our civilian life, and it's really hard for us sometimes to make that leap and step out of that yes or no sir, three bags full environment. It was
Yeah.
my first job. I was an assistant vice president at a very large nonprofit. I was two doors down from the president of the organization. She was Molly. I was Scott. I had to fight every urge in my body to call her ma'am all the time.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
really
yeah.
hard to make those kind of steps. So that's one element. The other thing is there's a lot that we don't know. Sometimes we don't want to admit that we don't know something. And frankly, the more senior you get, I perceive, the less willing we are to admit that we don't know something. That relates to finances. That relates to, like I said, my term business readiness, how to arrange your finances, insurance, the organization of your company. And it's hard to sometimes go out there and admit that I don't know what even the terms you're using are going so far over my head that I can't understand anything you're talking about. We have to be willing to go out and talk to people. We have to be willing to say I don't know and I want to learn. Once we get over those two hurdles, the resiliency, the willingness to adapt, the ability to see opportunity that comes with being veterans opens a wide door.
You hit the nail right on the head, is that we bring a lot of good habits, and then there's habits that don't really translate to the civilian world. And you've sat in sessions at the War College, you sit in with the SBA advisory committee. Besides the yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, three bags full, all that fun stuff, what are some, in your perspective, the biggest military habits that we need to unlearn to be successful in the civilian environment, besides dealing with the ambiguity that comes with being in the civilian space?
Well, I think I've hit really two of the big ones: a willingness of the literacy issues of learning a new language, learning a new opportunity, and understanding how to go about doing that. Pursuing new education and training opportunities is one, and then going out there and grinding the network. Um, we tend to think of network as a dirty word. Networking is kind of a transactional engagement. And that's not what networking is about. Networking is engaging with people, learning from them, looking for opportunities. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of trying to avoid it because we see it as transactional, or in some cases, treating it as transactional instead of looking at it from the long ball. A mentor of mine told me right up front that networking is always a bank shot. And if you look at it from that way, you never know what meeting with someone, learning from them, hearing about their experience, them getting to know you. It may not be for 2 or 3 years before all of a sudden that comes back around, a bank shot that gives you a business opportunity. Now, in a perfect world, something happens more directly. But what you're doing is establishing relationships, and relationships are what count really in any business environment. And it relates to getting a job, even relationships, relationships, relationships. People know you, they trust you, they understand you, they're confident in who you are. The opportunities open themselves.
I love
And
it.
you know,
I love that 1000%. I do want to talk about the National Veteran Small Business Coalition because that's something that's
yep,
very passionate to me and something that's super important. I have friends who have gone through the Warrior Rising programs, and I've seen a lot of those businesses really grow and thrive. I've seen some flutter and then some sort of collapse on themselves. If there are veterans here that are looking to start their own small business, and I can see five in the attendance roll right now, that are looking to stand up a small business, what are things that you offer to help them get that leg up? And what are things that they need to be looking out for when they're standing up their own small business while they're here in Skillbridge?
yeah. So, couple points. NVSBC specifically is more focused with small businesses that are looking at federal contracting and becoming government contractors. That's not to say that we can't help get connected to other programs that are probably more directed at individuals who are thinking about starting a consulting company or something more on the main street level, barbershop, pipe fitter, plumber, those types of things. I would say too, with this crowd, I am more than happy to follow up with anybody to talk, regardless of what kind of small business they're interested in. Me personally, that's my commitment to anybody on this call. But what NVSBC and organizations like us provide are three things. One is training. And NVSBC uses a body of knowledge that looks at the starting of a company all the way through to uh, placing that company, merger acquisition, selling it to the next veteran, and retiring. And we have a playbook, a body of knowledge that extends completely across that full spectrum of small businesses, and that's how we construct our training. We have virtual trainings, we have in-person events, we have a consulting program where someone can call in free. You just need to go to our website, get set up on a consulting, and talk to one of our consultants about what you're struggling with, whether it's getting started, whether it's growing, whether it's breaking into a new client, anything that they might find, and that's free. And for this group too, we also have a YouTube channel that's free, hundreds of hours of access to training about business readiness, how to set up and run a business, procurement readiness, how to work with the federal government to get procurement. So those are kind of some samples of the training we do. The second thing we do is engagement, and we create opportunities to put people in the right room with the right people to earn a dollar, to make business happen, whether that's with a fellow small business, whether that's with a large prime, whether that's with a federal agency, or whether that's with a service provider that you can trust for banking, insurance, legal, accounting, whatever that might be. We're really well known for creating conditions where people can succeed in engagement and networking. And then, Clay, you've alluded to the third. We do a lot of advocacy and support for small businesses at the federal policy and at the congressional legislative level. And we enjoy a really good relationship with them as well. So those are kind of our three tenets of what we can provide.
I love that. I love that. I do want to talk about real quick. There's a little bit of murkiness, obviously, going into federal contracting, and right now there's a lot of things that are up in the air when it comes down to federal contracts right now.
Yep.
So if we have these small businesses going after these contracts right now, Is your advice still the same from a year and a half ago with the previous administration to this new administration, or are you kind of changing your dynamic a little bit? I have some friends who are small business people that have contracts with the federal government, and they're kind of pulling their hair out to where they're kind of resembling you and I right now with the less that they on top of their head because there's just been a lot more ambiguity thrown into it. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of a red ocean, blue ocean question, Clay. It's a great question. Um, I start with this. Running a small business is not for the faint of heart, no matter where you do it, whether it's federal, commercial. You have to have a passion for it. You have to be committed to it. If you're just looking at it for a salary and a job, go find a salary and a job because it's not easy. You have to really be passionate about it. That said, I think one of the there might be more opportunity right now for veteran-owned small business in the federal marketplace than there has been in the last 10 years. Why do I say that? There's disarray, there's question, there's my God, what's going on? But the federal government right now has been very consistent in saying they support veterans and veteran small businesses. And in some cases, unfortunately, other small business categories aren't sharing that same type of attention. So I believe that you're going to see growth opportunities for veteran small businesses. But that comes with a big caveat. You have to be an innovator. You have to be willing to operate in a disrupted environment. You have to be thinking about what's next and how you can serve the federal customer and providing them with something that they need. And it has to be of high quality. If anybody's coming in thinking they're just going to leverage being a veteran-owned business, that's not what wins a contract. Never has been what wins a contract. What wins a contract, federally or commercially, is a solid company with a good product that they can sell at a good price and that they can be a good vendor to whomever they're selling to. And oh, by the way, I'm a veteran-owned company. That gives you kind of that extra leg up. But right now, anyone who's willing to jump in and be disciplined about what they're doing and have the runway to do it, I think can position themselves very well right now to come out with some positivity. But again, they have to be willing to work. There is no handouts, maybe a little bit of a hand up, but even that's a challenge right now, Clay.
I Great answer. I love that 1000%. There was a question in the chat, and I'm interested in this one, your perspective. Laney, if I screw up your name, I apologize. What was the difference between using NVSBC or contacting your local Apex Accelerator office? Could you explain that for those of us who don't understand that?
Sure.
And what is that difference? Obviously, I kind of know it, but go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, and for one thing, NVSBC partners with the Apex Accelerators and the Veteran Business Outreach Center, VBOX. And so, like I mentioned, our consulting program, if you reach out to us from consulting and we determine based on an interview with you that what you need is an Apex Accelerator, we'll, we'll, we'll point you to your nearest Apex Accelerator to get help with started. So we're all kind of trying to work in the same ecosystem and support one another. And we try not to duplicate efforts of those that we know are already out there. An Apex Accelerator will help you get set up and ready to go. They'll help you with define a capability statement. They'll help you understand the procurement process. But quite honestly, once you've accomplished that, there's not much more they can help you with. Okay, and what an organization like NVSBC represents is the ability to take those baseline documents, your registration, and get inculcated into the ecosystem. So you're interacting with the people in the system. You're getting deeper training that goes beyond just the entry level and getting registered and getting started. And you start learning how to interact with those that you're trying to sell to. and those who can help your business grow and your partnerships and things like that. An Apex is going to be, I kind of think, college terms 101, 201, 301. Apex is probably going to get you through to 101. NVSBC is going to get you to 201 to 301 up to graduate level work as you run your business.
I love that. Thank you, Scott. You use the term procurement ready at NVSBC. What is the single biggest red flag that tells a government agency a veteran-owned business isn't ready for a contract? And what do you recommend to be on spec, ready to go for that?
Yeah. So, it's the do loop that we're all used to. A federal agency wants you to have experience. You don't get experience without getting a chance to have them build your experience, right? So it's this do loop. So that's one of the biggest roadblocks is, and there are some programs that will help, uh, get you entry level into a federal program. But typically speaking, the first step will be to work with somebody else as a subcontractor. Okay, coming into with a prime, another small business that might have a prime contract with a federal agency that's looking to fill a gap on a contract that they don't have the expertise with. Working with someone else to get some times at bat so that then you have the experience as you grow to be able to work directly with a larger prime or a federal agency directly. But most importantly, what any of them are looking for is, a solution to a problem they have that they don't want, or or a solution that they don't even realize they need until you bring it to their attention. They're looking for disciplined companies that focus and are successful in a particular area. One of the biggest mistakes I see with companies starting out, I'll meet them and say, okay, what do you sell? Well, I've got a lot of experience, and it comes out that I think I'll sell either janitorial services or cybersecurity structure. And it's like, you got to pick one, particularly as you're starting out. You got to be very disciplined, focused, so that you can create a good product or service that's going to meet the need of a client or customer. And that's really critical. That client or customer could be someone that you're a subcontractor under, filling a niche in a bigger contract, or meeting the need of an agency that doesn't even know they have a problem. 3 years ago at our conference, we had a veteran-owned company who's pretty well established, but they walked into our conference, saw a veteran affairs contracting officer that they know, and they said, hey, you have a problem that you don't even know yet. And she said, what? Well, tell me about it. And within 2 weeks, that contracting officer had signed a sole source contract with this company for a robotic solution to a medical product that they needed. And a year later on our floor at our conference, she was able to see that robot in action on the exhibit floor. But it's that kind of a model of understanding a need, getting to the right person to tell them you can solve their need, and then closing the loop with a quality product that they need.
I like that, and we got some of us here who work at Seven Eagle. We got kind of some exposure to that 2 weeks ago because we had a really good idea, and then we realized the scale and the scope was just going to be too much for us to be a prime, and there were way too many moving variables. So I appreciate that. But for those who want to sit there and try to pursue that as a sub, would you recommend maybe working with a state government agency to sit there and get some of that experience, or just go down the path of being a subprime?
It depends. It really depends on what the product is and what you're trying to accomplish. I think getting started at the state, local, education level, that is also good, and the federal government will use that as past performance. A little bit harder than if it's working for the federal government, but it's really a matter of what you're trying to sell and how you want to go about selling it. It's One nice thing about the federal government is they buy one way, they follow a set of acquisition regulations. There's one, you know, generally speaking, one belly button, if you will. State sales, there's 50 states, they all do it differently. There are different jurisdictions depending on where you're at. So if you're operating in a state where you can sell to a state and know how to do that, that's great. Uh, but again, it just kind of really depends on what you're selling and who buys what you're selling and where the greatest opportunity might be. But I can tell you, if it's something that the federal agencies are buying, I mean, it's subcontracting, joint venture partners, some type of mentor proteges. There's a lot of different models out there that can get you access to those opportunities.
I think, I mean, I've seen some subs and I've seen some primes really go absolutely rogue. So I really do like that they're putting more guard, like there was those two kids that were supplying ammo to the Afghans. I know that was a big, huge, mess. And then I saw a bunch of others as well. So I'm glad to sit there and see that you're helping guide people through those guidelines and understanding that. Aside from the veteran-owned tag, which is a competitive advantage, what other things, when it comes down to federal contract proposals, that the civilian firms can't match from your perspective?
Um, I, there's a lot when it comes to the veteran-owned companies that almost intangibles, Clay. And this might not be getting to what you're asking, but we all learned how to operate in undefined conditions. We all learn how to innovate, and we also are very mission oriented, and we learned how to do that. I mean, those are all incredible, and we're very resilient. Not everybody in the civilian world has those capabilities. And while our time in service, in some regards, restricted our ability to learn how things work, we also spent that time maturing to a level where you know people working with us like to work with us. They see that maturity, they see that mission focus, they see the resiliency. So there's a lot of intangibles that come with it. But honestly, you're competing against everybody. If they've got a good product at a good price and meets the needs of the customer, you're competing against everyone that has those opportunities. So it comes down to the intangibles, and then having that veteran moniker does help once you're able to close the loop with those folks that you're trying to sell to.
I love that. I love that. I do want to talk about something that's on your LinkedIn profile. You've claimed that you can find $100,000 in a business in 45 minutes without giving away the secret sauce to it. Where is the money usually hiding in a veteran-run company from your
Any
experience?
any company, but yes, couple of different, just a couple of examples, but oftentimes in costs, we can find it, the costs that don't need to be, that aren't contributing directly to the mission of the company or aren't contributing to the solution that your client or customer is trying to sell. And small business, it's really hard to be disciplined and on top of your cost structure. I was working with a veteran-owned business. We went through an evaluation of their costs, and they discovered as part of that evaluation that they were making they'd made a few double payments to vendors that the vendor hadn't pointed
Oh,
out,
oh,
and that they were sitting on accounts receivable that hadn't been paid for over 90 days that they were unaware of. And oftentimes, this is a somewhat of a kind of a construction type company, so they have a lot of inventory. They have clients that they they produce for, but that's just one example in their costs. The other thing, which goes directly to your bottom line, is pricing. Now, federal pricing on contracts is a little different. So this is more talking outside of the federal. but we tend to underprice and drive ourselves by our price, not the value that we bring to our client. And my experience is that there's oftentimes room for marginal price increases that can oftentimes lead to 5 to 10 to 15% increase in profit just by modifying some adjustments. And I can walk. I have a simulator that I can walk somebody through to show the impact. But to give you context of this, if you go into a McDonald's today and buy a meal and it costs you $10, and the next week you go in and it costs you $11, are you going to walk away from that meal because it went up by a dollar? The odds are most people aren't even going to notice the $1 increase. That's a 10% increase in pricing. And the historical information shows that typically just for an incremental 10% increase in pricing, you would have to lose over half of your customers before you'd stop breaking even on your existing profits by doing a 10% profit increase, if that makes sense.
It
And
does. It does.
the odds of losing 50% of your customer base over a 10% price increase are infinitesimal. And when I walk a business owner through that, they're like, I say, are you going to lose 50% of your customers over this price increase? And they're like, no way. I don't think I'll lose 10%. So when you start looking at costs to the company and pricing, costs, we all do it. We see the next big whiz bang thing. Oh, I need a subscription too. I need a subscription too. I'm operating in multiple software sets while paying for Microsoft 365 to support my word processing and my email, not realizing that I could do all of that in Microsoft 3. This is just an example, Microsoft 365, and get rid of a whole bunch of other things. I did this recently with my COO with NVSBC this last year. We went through a price and a cost evaluation, and we subscribed to Microsoft 365. And we realized, and we were subscribing to Slack, and we had a different phone provider, and we hired a Microsoft consultant who helped us in a couple months bring all of that under our Microsoft subscription that we were already paying for. And we started saving $300 or $400 a month on superfluous subscriptions. And now we're operating more effectively as a team because we're doing it all under one roof. Now, I know some of you may not like Microsoft. I'm not trying to sell Microsoft. It's the example that I'm trying to save. Then once you get into price and cost, it becomes an understanding of what kind of marketing and how you define what you sell, and whether you've been able to articulate a market dominating position that sets you apart from your competitors, not based on price, but based on value. Solving a problem they have that they don't want, or giving them a solution they don't have that they need. And and working through those types of things, typically in 45 minutes, I've seen the ability to solve those kind of problems. And that's kind of in my consulting world, not related to NVSBC, but as I just said, it benefited NVSBC by kind of having this knowledge and working through that as well.
I love it. There's one person here who this is going to resonate with, and I hope he's paying attention to what I'm about to say. A lot of veterans transition to become solo entrepreneurs where they do everything themselves. Explain why that's the fastest way to burnout, and how do they start building a system instead of just doing a job for themselves?
Yeah, in many cases, I know a lot of solopreneurs who are happy with what they're doing and successful, and that's great. So I don't want to necessarily suggest that. Again, it depends on what you want to be when you grow up, and the big part of that is, if I want to sustain a small business, bring in the income that I need, be my own boss. That's great. But running a company takes effort. There's marketing, there's the finance, there's the management of the day to day, there's the sales, there's the strategy. All of that needs to happen whether you're serving a client or not. And as you gain in success, you will ultimately start bumping into that issue of how do I sustain my success? How do I grow if I want to grow and still meet the needs of my clients and customers if I don't start thinking about what my strategy will be to grow and bring more resources on. It's ultimately, I would say, I'm guessing 80-90% of those who start out as solopreneurs. But eventually you have to stop working in the company and work on the company and have others work in the company. And you have to start your strategy up front thinking, how will I make that transition at some point? Because it means you have to define processes, systems, standards, metrics that others can execute for you. And if you don't get to that point, and then something happens with you, I have a very dear friend who unfortunately suffered from a significant issue with cancer. Was a speaker, was part of their main income was devolved by talking to others and coaching and everything. And the cancer unfortunately had to do with the throat and took away their ability to communicate. And the company was so reliant on the one individual, the owner, although there were other employees, that the company couldn't function without the owner being able to work in the company. And it's that kind of cautionary tale that you want to be very cautious about as you move forward. Because ultimately what typically can happen is you get a search, you get a good product, people buy from you, you're selling to them, you're serving the clients, but you don't have enough time to build the next round of clients and get your pipeline going and get your systems going. And then ultimately you hit the end of an engagement with the client and you haven't been able to build the next one in and the next one in and the next one in because you're too busy delivering your product. And it can be that's why you see, I think, companies 2, 3, 4 year mark oftentimes don't survive, is because they didn't prepare themselves for that cycle of business and sales and delivery and marketing. Does that make sense, Clay? Is that what you're
That
getting
makes
at?
a lot of sense to me, and I hope that the individual that I pointed that question at really does pay attention to that as well. You said in a very interesting segue in the community for sure, because you represent the SBA, or excuse me, you represent veterans at the SBA and in Congress. What's the one piece of legislation or policy currently that's on the table that these transitioning veterans need to have on their radar right now if they want to go down this career path?
There's a lot at play right now regarding the the small business set aside program at the SBA. As far as for those of you who don't follow it, there's a law that says that federal agencies need to set aside 5% of their federal spend to veteran-owned companies. And part of that is they also have to set aside 23% just to small business in total. And then there's subcategories for some other women-owned, HUB-zone, and what's called small disadvantage, which oftentimes you hear referred to as a subset of that, which is the 8A program. Executive orders, policy decisions have been made with the current administration that lead to some questions about how that system is going to operate into the future. And that we pay a lot of attention to this because this obviously has some significant impacts for veteran-owned small businesses.
Massive impacts.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I say right now, everything I'm hearing, veterans are safe. And in fact, you could eventually see an increase towards veterans. But again, unfortunately, that's to the detriment of some of the other small business set aside categories. That's just a fact. That's what this is. But right now, there's a lot of lack of clarity as it relates to how that will all be implemented. And quite honestly, what's needed is legislation that comes in and fixes some of the statutory requirements that are at odds with some of the executive orders and policies that have been done legally. I mean, but oftentimes when you hear about the administration and policies changing, you hear a term called up to the statutory limit, right? So if it's written in law, you can't change it. Other than that, we can change it. Well, sometimes that's not black and white. There's odds there that the statutory things need to be fixed and changed in order for it to be really effective. It's getting to that legislation. And in fact, I was a meeting 2 weeks ago with the House Whip, Representative Emmert's chief of staff. It was a very small group, and we asked, when's the legislation going to start catching up with some of this? And with everything that's happening with budgets and continuing resolutions and short time windows and midterms, it's really hard for them to build a consistent legislative plan to get to address some of that. So, we're keeping an eye on that, and we're urging action when we can to close some of those holes in these conflicts of understanding between the two. So that's where I'd be focused, and that's what NVSBC exists for. So small businesses can have some comfort that they don't have to be completely focused on that, and know that somebody's in their court for them.
5% for veteran small businesses seems like a low number, and then 23% for small businesses in general. That seems like a pretty low number to me from my perspective. Obviously advocating to elected representatives would sit there and maybe push that a little bit further, but do you see that it seems like a low number. 5% for me just seems like that's a drop in the bucket per se.
Well, I would say yes and no. Remember, that's for service disabled veteran owned businesses, right? So you have to be service disabled. That represents $51 billion a year in opportunity, by the way. And I would tell you 3 years ago, the number was 3%, and NVSBC actively lobbied and was successful in getting that increased to 5%. So that was a 31 billion to 51 billion about jump in annual spend. I don't want to be greedy, and yeah, it seems small, Clay, but the reality is there's only about 12,000 veteran-owned companies out there that get contracts right now. There's 30,000 registered. I'd like to just see the delta between the 12 to 30 start getting a few more contracts. But the reality is the federal agencies were having a hard time meeting 3%, and then they were getting up to 4%, most of which is coming from the VA, who has a mandate to go to veterans first, rightfully so. And so I'd just like to see the agencies meet the 5% before we worry about getting too greedy and going higher than that. They already have a challenge meeting that percentage, and it creates a huge opportunity for veterans, even at the 5%. So yeah, we could go more, but I see some questions. You want to take? Looks like you've got a couple of questions there.
That's exactly where I was going to go next. I apologize, Larney. If I'm screwing that up, smack me over the head.
That's a new one.
Yeah, how do you pronounce it? I apologize.
That is Laurie, sir. But you
Laurie,
were close.
Laurie,
Yes,
I apologize. I've seen some questions for you in the chat. You fire away, and then the man who is the small business himself is raised his hand as well. So, Laurie, go ahead, brother.
I'm gonna first steal Nick's question. AI, sir, how are you implementing that?
How am I implementing it? Or
yes, sir.
How's
how
it
are
being
we utilizing that? Yes, sir.
Oh man, well, I probably not as well as I could, but I'm actually. It's funny. I was on AI just before this doing. I don't do much without um, you know, low hanging fruit type stuff. I don't write much without, you know, leveraging at least reviews in AI and everything else. But, you know, I mentioned even the NVSBC transition to Microsoft 365 and bringing Copilot into the mix of being able to expedite everything from meetings and recording what we're doing and everything. So in many regards, we don't do much these days without, particularly in the efficiency realm. You know, we've got 9 people on our staff. You know, uh, proposals, documents, reviewing documents, summarizing, engaging with partners about everything we do that requires written documentation. We're leveraging AI. Same with presentation and stuff. And I realize, you know, that's rudimentary AI type work. But my COO is really driving towards automations as well, and how that all integrates through AI forms that we work on as well. That's probably not a super duper great idea. Give me a break. I'm a nonprofit executive without a lot of resources, but you know, so but what I do see is a huge interest in leveraging of AI for automation and opportunities in the companies that we work with as well. And you know, there's kind of two schools of thought. Oh, AI is cheating. I kind of wondered 30, 40 years ago if people thought that using a spreadsheet like Excel was cheating to do your math. And that's kind of how I look at AI these days. If you're not leveraging the technology that's available, you're going to be, you know, sitting behind watching everybody who does uh, outpace you. I don't know if that helps your answers your question, but that's kind of some of my perspective on it.
Yes, sir. I have one more question for you, Scott. FAR acquisition 3601, does that currently apply to us? Say if we were to open a business and start bidding and submitting and winning, would we fall into that category of FAR 601?
Oh, you got to help me out. I don't have all the FARs memorized. What
That
does
would
that?
be the, what is it? Oh my goodness, I can't even think of the word. Where it's a conflict of interest due to us working in the DoD and then submitting bids in DoD and
Oh,
winning. But yes,
oh,
sir. Yes,
so
sir.
you're still active duty and you're
Yes,
concerned
sir.
about um, there are there are ways to work in that. I know a number of companies who um, most of that I can name at least 3 right now that either started their company at DoD. One woman I'm very proud of was at NSA as an employee and still working at NSA and working with federal contracting. And there's wickets that you have to step through, but you can get through it. It doesn't eliminate your participation, but
Perfect.
there's some areas you need to, you know, address to do that.
Thank you,
It's
Scott.
hard. It's harder. And one strategy to think about is don't work where, you know, there are plenty of agencies out there. If you're a military member, don't necessarily think the Department of War is your first go-to customer. There's plenty of other clients out there where there won't be a conflict of interest that are probably buying what you're selling.
Yes, sir.
Nick,
Thank you, Scott.
you bet.
Nick, go ahead.
Well, what's going on, Scott? How you doing?
I'm good.
Pleasure chatting with you. Quick question for you. Now, with the recent news of Anthropic becoming supply chain risk to the Department of War and having to transition to OpenAI, what's your take on that as an opportunity for somebody who's pretty heavily in the field of knowledge on both competitors? I think it's pretty funny. OpenAI is like, yeah, we're with Anthropic, but we're going to sign with the Department of War because we want that money. What's your thoughts on that?
I think wait 6 months and we'll see.
Well, yeah, I was
To be
wondering
That's
if
what I
your
was
thoughts.
thinking.
My thought is there opportunity for somebody to kind of swoop in there and, I hate to say it, but people who've been using Anthropic for their for their framework, basically take their model and kind of just use OpenAI and kind of almost be caught up as a competitor?
Yeah, I think the question you have to ask is to deliver what? Okay, because nobody at Department of War is just saying bring me Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever. It's what is the tool being used to deliver, And so I think if there is a capability that you're aware of that's going to be impacted because it's based on the foundation of a particular AI, there could be an opportunity there. Although I think I'd be really cautious right now about jumping too much into something like that, just based on kind of the let's face it, there's probably some political reasoning that's going into this more than truly a national security threat, and how much of that will change, in the next 6 months or even next month. God only knows. So that's a really caution folks on what you jump into and what you don't jump into. The other thing that, again, military folks tend to go, Department of War, VA are my client base, and Department of War, particularly when we're talking about cyber technology capabilities, they have an incredible hurdle at the Department of War that you have to be aware of. It's called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model,
CMMC.
CMMC.
Yeah, that's actually what I was asking about, is if I want to be a CMMC consultant, and I built a framework through OpenAI, because a lot of the CMMC clients are using Anthropic. So if I'm just like, hey, let me spin up a CMMC 2.0 consulting firm through OpenAI, like I'm pretty much at the same starting point as other consulting companies.
Maybe. Do you have the money to pay for your certification for the CMMC to be a CMMC instructor? The difference right now with CMMC is the DoD requirements for you to enter that space are so significant that you really have to be a pretty well established company to be able to afford to meet the requirements that DoD requires with CMMC, if that makes sense. So, if you're a company that's particularly going to be doing cyber, but it applies to anybody working with DoD, we're hearing of companies that it's costing them $45,000 to $100,000 just to get their CMMC certification because of the requirements and the way they're laid out for DoD. That's money that's overhead. You don't get that back. You can't apply that right now to your contracts even as part of payback. You've got to spend that money and the time to get certified before you can even be considered for a contract with Department of War. And there are 23 other agencies who spend money just like Department of War that don't have those tough of requirements. And those requirements apply to anyone who's applying or helping others get CMMC certified. You have to meet those. You have to meet more rigorous standards to fall into those categories. So if you're just getting started, it's probably going to be a challenge financially to get there, unless you have some type of a back end that's already feeding cash inflow, contracting, and your ability to sustain that investment over time.
Go ahead. Last question.
Is it back at me again?
Yep, your last question.
Oh, perfect. So I'm glad you brought up that point, Scott. So this brings my question. If your company has no capital, this is why I see a lot of people in contracting game have multiple sections on PSC codes or Nexus codes that they try to get to because they're trying to build the capital. Are you against that then? Or are you saying still you want us more focused in an area?
If you're just getting started, you have to ask yourself why. If it's a shotgun scatter because I'm not sure which I'm going to succeed at, that can be interpreted as a lack of discipline and a lack of a willingness to invest in a proper solution. If you have multiple NAICS codes and PSC codes and and you can deliver a quality product at a reasonable price against all of those, that's great. But typically companies that are succeeding that way are established, and they started out with one or two very specific disciplined areas. And then as they got mature, then they were able to start diversifying their offerings and their products. And so if you have the expertise, you have a product or a service that you're able to provide that no one else can at the price and quality that you are across all those codes, go for it.
Okay.
But my experience is typically it's diluting your attention to something that you can be successful at, and it's hedging against, well, what if I pick the wrong thing? And you're not able to, so you really have to be careful about that.
Yes, sir.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Scott, this has been very insightful, and I do want to thank you very much for your time and your insight today. Before we give these guys a quick little break before the next session, any lasting words of advice or anything you want to leave us with, a little tidbit of wisdom?
No, two things or a couple things. My LinkedIn was on the chat there. Find it. I would be upset if you all don't connect with me if we're not already connected. If you need or have more questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you have a specific question about federal contracting, consider reaching out to our consulting page through our website, which was also posted in the chat. And if you're interested in nonprofit work and would like to think about, opportunities as part of your skill bridge at NVSBC, I know Jordy and Clay are more than willing to let you have some of our time. If you're a nonprofit person and want to see what that's like, don't hesitate to reach out that way as well. I'm available. I'm here. I like doing this. More than willing to find some time over the next few weeks if you'd like to spend some one-on-one talking about transition, talking about finding the next job, learning my failures so you don't have to, whatever that might be. So thanks, Clay. As always, I enjoyed the conversation and I'm here for you all. So
I had a great time chatting with you, Scott. It's a pleasure. Next time you're up on the calendar, I'm going to throw myself on there because it definitely wasn't very insightful for me. Let's give a round of applause to Scott Jensen from
thanks,
National
everybody.
Small Business Coalition. Thank you very much.